everyone, and welcome back to Labor Live at 12:05, your weekly breakdown to the crazy things that are happening in Juneau and how they're related to Alaska's labor movement. We have a great episode. Obviously, there's crazy things happening in Juneau every single week, but I think this week is a little exceptionally crazy. Have you ever heard of an organization doing a study, and then after seeing the results of the study, they go, actually, this is not helpful at all. We need a different study to actually get the information we're looking for. Well, that's exactly what is happening with the State of Alaska Department of Administration and our special guest, none other than Heidi Drygas, Executive Director of ASEA Local 52, which represents thousands of state workers across the state. So Heidi, thank you so much for joining the program.
Thank you so much for having me. We represent over 8,300 public employees.
8,300. That is a lot of members. We are always excited to have ASEA involved in our labor movement, one of our biggest affiliates here at the Alaska AFL-CIO. But before we jump into the drama-filled committee meeting in House Finance that happened earlier this week, it might be, if we could refresh our audience a little bit about the salary study. I know last year we had a big fight to even see the results of the salary study that were kind of authorized via $1 million expenditure to the state from the legislature the year prior. So what was kind of that all about?
Well, let me clear that up. We're still in a battle over the salary study. So the salary study, when I first came into this position as executive director of ASEA, it was 3 years ago. And the second day on the job, I had a discussion with the then labor relations director, Kate Sheehan. And Kate had told me that the governor has put money in the budget for a statewide salary study for about $1 million. And I said, great, we would like to support you in that effort. We will talk with legislators. And so a lot of us, certainly at ASEA, but other public employee unions were supportive of that effort. Ultimately, the funding was passed, the legislature authorized it, the governor approved it, and they went out to bid and were able to find a contractor to perform a salary study. And the salary study was performed by a company named Siegel. And Siegel is a reputable company who does this type of work all over the country. And they have had other contracts with the state of Alaska in the past. So that time frame was May of 2023. We had been under the impression that the salary study would be released basically the following year, and we had heard from the administration that the salary study would be released at the end of June 2024. Then we heard the end of July 2024. And then there were these delays. There were these continual delays. And as we learned, what had been happening behind the scenes was there was essentially the administration got the salary study. We had heard from sources that it was very good for public employees. And the administration, I can only imagine, wasn't happy about that. And so the administration, we can only assume, proceeded to work with the contractor and attempt to manipulate the study. What we have learned now, and fast forward, we ended up suing the administration over getting the copy of the salary study. There were at least 9 drafts of the salary study before they released the final salary study at the end of April 2025. Now, when they did that, we ended up, we were in negotiations for a new collective bargaining agreement for 8,000 state workers. And we wanted the results of the salary study to help us inform our negotiations, both us and the state, really. And we were met with a roadblock that there was no salary study that was complete. We can't release it. We're like, well, we want the drafts. They wouldn't release them. We ended up suing, and we're still in litigation over that, which I can get into if you're interested, but we are still fighting for the drafts of the salary study. We are in litigation, and we've teamed up with APA, the Alaska Public Employees Association, who represents the supervisory unit. We represent the general government unit, have teamed up to fight that lawsuit, fight the administration to get the drafts of the salary study. But at that same time last year, the administration was really frustrating the legislature. The legislature paid for this study and wanted the information to inform its role, its gigantic role in developing the budget for the state of Alaska. And one of the biggest reasons we did this, and maybe I should have led with this, is that we have been in a sustained recruitment and retention crisis in the state of Alaska for many years since the pandemic. We have, it's no news to anyone here in the House of Labor that we have had an exodus of working age Alaskans leaving this state for better opportunities outside. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But as far as public employment and state service goes, one of the biggest problems is we don't pay people enough. And we do not have a livable retirement system. We lost our defined benefit retirement system 20 years ago. So we can't retain employees anymore. They don't have a reason to stay. If you don't have good pay and you certainly don't have the benefits to beat the private sector, you're going to lose folks. So that's a long background to where we're at now.
Yeah. And just to kind of recap, the legislature and the union, we need a salary study, right? We got to know, how are our state employees paid comparatively to other public employees across the country, right? If our employees, which we all know, you don't really need a study to know, are vastly underpaid comparative to other public employment options. And that means, obviously, who's going to want to work for the state of Alaska when you can make more money doing the exact same work somewhere else? So they get the study, the results get sent to the administration, and maybe the phrase cooking the books is not the right word to use, but they didn't really like the numbers.
Maybe it is.
Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but they didn't like the numbers. It probably showed that, wow, state employees are vastly
really underpaid
comparative to maybe what they expected. So they do 9 different iterations. That's a lot of drafts. I don't think
we haven't seen any of those drafts.
Right. Wow. So now we have a study that was finally released, and the study still showed public employees across the board, maybe excluding some areas, are underpaid. They're not compensated, and that it's really not a competitive market that the state of Alaska is operating in.
I mean, the administration can only put its thumb on the scale so much. The facts are the facts. That state employees, no matter how much you attempt to manipulate the data, are underpaid. And even the final 10th draft, which became the final result of the salary study, shows the vast majority of state employees are underpaid. And that happened in April. We finally saw that study in April, at the end of April 2025, as we were closing in on the final weeks of our negotiations with the state of Alaska on our 3-year collective bargaining agreement.
Right. And that's, people at home might think, oh, wow, yeah, that's a drama-filled story, which it is. But man, does it get better?
Ongoing.
So fast forward to this week, there is a committee hearing in House Finance, which, from my understanding, was just kind of a follow-up, a check-in. The legislature going, hey, we had that salary study that we finally saw in April. What's the state doing about it? What is how are they implementing the results? Like, what's the next step in making sure that we have, a competitive compensation to attract and retain a quality workforce? And it seemed a pretty bipartisan rebuke, because the state basically said, that study doesn't actually give us the information we need. We're actually going to do another study. Did I hear that right?
The hearing got spicy. So, and I don't know if any of us expected that level of spice when we walked into that room. The House Finance started off with a very routine overview of the Department of Administration's budget. Now, typically, commissioners present, when you're presenting your department budget to House or Senate Finance, typically you see the commissioner at the table. That was certainly the case when I was Commissioner of Labor. I was always at the table presenting our budget. Commissioner Paula Vrana was nowhere to be found. And that is unusual. And the committee took note of that. As far as I can tell, the Administrative Services Director, who ended up doing that presentation, was very, very new and did not have a depth of knowledge about the department in a way to answer just kind of basic fundamental questions that dove below the surface, that the committee really wanted information about and deserved, frankly, as the House Finance Committee. So once she completed her overview, the new Labor Relations Director, Heidi Drygas, who I met at that hearing afterwards, has only been with the state since November. And she's only been with the state since November. And previous to that, she was in federal service. So she's never worked, and to my knowledge, she's never worked for the state of Alaska before. So she
was around the previous 3 years of this whole monologue of a story.
Yes.
Wow. That's important to know.
It is. And I think that the administration was really not giving the red meat that the House Finance Committee wanted. Obviously, this was this was in the papers, this was in the press, this was something that the legislature was struggling with to get the information about the salary study, and not for an academic exercise. They wanted to know, like, are we paying our state employees enough? We paid for this because we want to know this, because they all have constituents at home complaining and frustrated because we don't have enough people at OCS. We don't have enough people at the Division of Public Assistance. We don't have enough troopers. I mean, all these things that government does, these services that we provide to the public, we are struggling to keep up. We're struggling to pay our employees on time, the most fundamental thing that the state does. And unfortunately, I think the committee was hoping for a status update, like, catch us up to this point, and what are you doing now to implement it? And I would encourage folks who are tuning in to watch the hearing. It is really illuminating, and you can the frustration on the part of the House Finance Committee members, regardless of party affiliation, was palpable.
Right.
Basically at the bottom line is that they got the result of this study at the end of April, and it took them until November to realize, whoa, we got to look at our classification system. It's a mess. Now, to her credit, Director Drygas did say on the second day of her job, she put together the RFI to get proposals about redoing the classification system. That was something that she realized was not something that the state of Alaska or the Department of Administration had the bench to do. They don't have a very deep bench. They're struggling with recruitment and retention, just like every other department. Mm-hmm. So she did put that together. But that is really a tough pill to swallow for a legislature that was eager to have that study last year, now realizes the answer to, several other questions about whether this study or this salary study is being implemented. The answer is no. It's not only not being implemented, but we need an RFI, request for information, about our classification system first before we can even tackle whether we implement the salary study. Not only that, there's no budget item in the governor's budget this year for an eventual contract to redo the classification system. And I think that's really where you started to see people's heads spin.
Right.
And the fact that the commissioner wasn't there to answer these really tough questions that, frankly, the House Finance Committee and the public deserves, was really troubling. And that came from Representative Hannan. That came from Representative Allard. I mean, you talk about diametrically opposed folks at the ends of the spectrum, but this isn't a partisan issue. We all know that we've got some troubling issues with respect to recruitment and retention. So there was a quote in there. Representative Will Stapp from Fairbanks was really, I think, the one who was sort of saying what people were thinking, but he talked about, this being an example of a Byzantine bureaucracy, and the fact that this issue, that we need another study to implement the study, and there's no money in the budget for that study, even in this budget, is grinding his soul into a fine powder or something. And that was sort of what my frustration is. If the department should have known it didn't have the capacity to put together or to implement this salary study without redoing its classification system, that should have happened within the next month after getting the salary study, is put this RFI out. Now they're just dragging it out. And I think what the legislature is realizing is that they're on their own. This isn't something that they're going to get the full cooperation of the executive branch on. They don't want to see salaries increase. They don't want to, this isn't something that they're willing to tackle. And that's not to diminish the work of the folks that are doing the job at the Department of Administration, the people that are just trying to do the work of the state. But, it really is a critique of the governor's administration and their unwillingness to tackle this problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really shows the administration doesn't really care. The fact that when asked, what are you going to do? Well, in order to do something about the salary study, we'd probably need to, look at our classifications. Do you have a plan? Well, we don't have any money for the budget for a plan. Well, yeah, what a disconnect. And this is something, I think we've seen time and time again in the labor movement, is we've seen administrations handicap their own government to then show proof, the government doesn't work. The government's inefficient, right?
Break the government and then say, government's broken.
They're the one putting, the stick in the spokes of your bicycle and then going, why did I crash, right? So, wow, what a spicy week. And what are kind of the next steps in this? We started in 2023. This is obviously, I would say we didn't start in 2023. We've known for a long time that the state workforce really needed an overhaul to remain competitive, whether that's the defined benefit pension, increased salaries. That's been going on for a long time. But the administration and the legislature finally acted in 2023. We're now in 2026 with kind of no action in sight. What are the next steps? How can the people at home help get the ball rolling, I guess?
Well, I think it's clear to many of us that the administration, Governor Dunleavy's administration, isn't going to do anything about this, before, the end of the year. So implementation of the salary study, fixing the classification system, that's going to be something that hopefully a worker-friendly governor, a new administration is going to have to tackle. The legislature's limited in what it can do to try to make progress on this issue. One of the fundamental and most basic things that the legislature can do to solve this problem is to pass HB 78 and return the state to a defined benefit pension. That is a huge piece of the puzzle, and that is within the legislature's purview to tackle. And of course, that is a hot issue that's right now in Senate Finance, the last committee of referral. And I think the other thing is that it's up to the unions. It's up to us to continue to advocate with strong collective bargaining agreements. We have folks going, the troopers are in negotiations right now. I think APA is going into negotiations next year. Local 71, I think, is going into negotiation next year. So we have a responsibility to try to do what we can to increase wages across the board. And what we do is not with the scalpel. What we do is we do an across the board increase on all salaries. Of course, the salary study tells us is that we have classifications at different levels. We have biologists who are making like 30% less than market, and we have other classifications that are doing okay, or they're only 15% below.
Right.
That's not something you can address in collective bargaining. So we can at least do across the board increases, but it's going to be up to the next administration. And I applaud the legislature for at least holding the administration's feet to the fire. And I do think they should continue to press on this issue, because it's their duty and their responsibility. They have to answer to their constituents about this, and this issue is not going to go away.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you mentioned that the fix is really going to come in the next administration. We know we've had 7 years of Governor Dunleavy. His final year, thank you, is coming to a close. Couldn't be more thankful, but it's important for all of us at home to really keep this issue in the front of our minds, because we have a very important election year where, our state cannot afford to elect someone that doesn't stand up for working people.
Amen.
Full stop. We cannot afford that. So people at home, when you're, thinking about who you're going to vote for this upcoming election season, or maybe you kind of come across one of the 85 candidates currently running for governor, ask them, what are you going to do about our state's workforce? What are you going to do to make Alaska a competitive place to work, and hold everyone accountable, regardless of what party affiliation they're from? So
Absolutely.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, because that is going to be so important. And definitely here at the AFL-CIO, we are going to make that a critical component of this upcoming election year, because we've been stagnant long enough, and it feels every year that we're at this inflection point, and it's going to take workers, public employee members, and private union members coming together as workers, as one, to really hopefully get someone that's actually going to take action on this issue.
Yep.
So
I can't agree with you more, Alex.
Yeah. Wow. What a week. And it's only.
It was a week. There were some other hearings too that were quite spicy. One
meeting of probably the 20 meetings that happened this week. How wild. Well, Heidi, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your day to really break down this drama that occurred. And hopefully we'll have you on, later on in the session, but also next year with an actual update. We'll have something, we'll have a candidate, we'll have a governor that actually is willing to work with labor, work with the legislature, and actually get this problem solved. So again, Heidi, thank you so much for joining the program.
Thanks, Alex.
Well, folks, that is it for this week's edition of Labor Live at 12:05. Tune in next week. We'll break down another exciting issue that's impacting Alaska's working families. Have a great weekend.